And also, I was just reading up on you a little bit earlier on. I know you a long time, but you've had some career, and to think that at this stage you're still going strong with Louisburgh, but to have played with Mayo for as long as you did and win your Connacht Championship medals, and then to go to Dublin and win a county championship up there, and in Wicklow as well. I mean, you've had a very colourful Gaelic football life so far.
Yeah, I suppose colourful would be a word. I've travelled well, I suppose you could say. So I suppose I was with Louisburgh up to before I went on to join Vincent's in Dublin. Prior to that, I'd been playing with Mayo. But I made the transition to Dublin due basically probably because of work and the travelling and that, you know. Had 3 great years with St. Vincent's as a club that I learned a huge amount in terms of. Mickey Whelan was there at the time, Pat Gilroy, and there was a whole host of, probably Dublin stars in terms of Dermot Connolly and Mossy Quinn and those. So I garnered a lot from that experience, and from there I was living on the south side of Dublin, and when I finished up playing with Mayo, I got a phone call from Mick O'Dwyer one evening asking would I be interested in coming in with Wicklow. So I went in there for 3 great years. I was playing my football with St. Pat's, Wicklow Town at the time, and I was lucky enough to win a county title there in my time there as well. So I made the transition again back to Louisburgh, and I'm having a really great time there. I have to say probably the most enjoyable part of my career so far.
Question for you: how would you compare playing under John Maughan to playing under Mick O'Dwyer? If I asked you to compare and contrast.
How long have you?
Have there any similarities maybe? I'll ask you that.
Yeah, I'd say there's a lot of similarities. We're doing a lot of running. But there, without doubt, John and Mick would have definitely some similarities in terms of the way they manage players, and in terms of both of them kept, I think, quite a small backroom team. And I know there's something we talked about outside, John, in terms of maybe the modern day football, where this football scene where there's a huge entourage involved with teams, and it may be to their detriment in some respects, and that it splits the focus. Whereas with Miko, and certainly in my time with John and them, they kept a very tight rein and a very, very close group around them. So from that aspect, I would say that would be definitely a key similarity. Also, two excellent motivators, and in terms of two guys with huge presence in a dressing room, and weren't afraid to call it as it were. So those would be key traits I think that would be definitely they'd have in common, you know.
Jeez, I thought you were going to land me in the theory. I
was building you up.
You must have been drinking my waddy during the meal, I'd say, Ossie. Ger, all the talk here in Mayo at the moment is about the 66-year famine and will it end or not on Sunday week. But to think Clare in 95, 81 years waiting for the Liam McCarthy Cup. Like when people mention 95 to you now, and even here tonight, what are the first memories or the first thoughts of that whole experience that spring to mind for you?
Well, I suppose the first thought is how magical it was to actually achieve the breakthrough in the end. But, you know, it didn't happen overnight, you know. And I you know, if you look back to John's time here in Clare, it had a huge influence on, you know, raising the expectation in Clare. You know, that I was explaining to John about going to that 92 Munster final against Kerry. I had been in charge of Clare under the ones at that time. The Wednesday night before that, we were beaten in the Munster final. I got sacked, and I didn't want to go to the match. But I remember so much about that game, you know, in Limerick that day. And there was this Kerry man beside us at the match, and we were having mighty crack with him. He was paying no heed to the game. He was certain Kerry were going to win and win easily. So we were slagging him, he was slagging us. But 5 minutes to go, he was gone. He had disappeared. Kerry were being beaten. And that had a huge influence on me, that John's demeanour with that Clare team, because we often trained together in Crusheen, you know, John, and they'd go in before, they'd be finished before us, and they'd go in and they'd use all the hot water in the shower, and we got in, there was no water. But it was leading up, you know, to see what they had done and how far they had gone. It gave us a huge incentive then, we thinking that hurling in Clare was superior to the football. So we were so anxious to make our mark. And I suppose making the breakthrough, when I look at Mayo now, you cannot say there's any fault in Mayo. The quality of player they have, the quality of leadership they have, the character this team has had. You know, they deserve the breakthrough, but doesn't get you the Sam Maguire Cup. But I think what we did was, when it came to Croke Park, we were able to focus in on the opposition. and to eliminate all the distractions, hype, everything else, and to go out there and give everything on the day. You know, we didn't pay any heed to what was said in papers. We didn't reply to anybody who criticised us, newspapers, radio, television, or anything else. It didn't matter. We were so much in that bubble and so focused on it. But I think the crucial thing, Mike, was the brilliant leaders we had. You know, we had fantastic leaders on that team. When you think of the like of Brian Lohan, geez, an Iron Man, like, you know, Anthony Daly, Shawnee McMahon, Ollie Baker, James E. O'Connor. There were so many of brilliant, brilliant leaders in that. And when I look at the Mayo team now, and I say you have every ingredient there is necessary in that Mayo team to make the breakthrough. So why not make it, you know? But it still all comes down to the day and producing your absolute maximum on the day. And we perfected that over 2 or 3 years. You know, we were able to do it. But like maybe we didn't meet a team as great as the Dublin footballers that are now. We met good teams, you know, we met All-Ireland champions. But still at the same time, it comes down to leadership and belief and producing it on the day. They're the 3 ingredients it takes to make the breakthrough.
Speaking of leadership and belief in particular, John, that's something that from time to time is levelled at Mayo people generally, that as a race of people, we don't believe in ourselves maybe as much as we should. And I don't know whether it's an historical thing or to do with immigration or whatever else. But in your time as Mayo football manager and as a Mayo footballer as well, was that an issue, do you think? And do you see it as any sort of an issue for this current crop?
No, Ger, actually, we were reminiscing there and chatting outside, and we talked about that famous 96 final. That Mayo team were so unlucky. Bounce of a ball in the last kick, a fortuitous kick from a Meath player from the halfway line and hopped over the bar, and Liam McHale sent off in the replay. That was certainly, there was no lacking of belief in the team in the Mayo. There was no, I mean, you hear this level that they poor on Mayo and God help Mayo, God help us, and all those cliches and what have you. I mean, for the first time since 1996, and we beat Kerry in that semi-final 96 with a brilliant display of great football. I mean, at half-time in the Kerry replay, I mean, I was never as relaxed. The first time in my lifetime since then, sitting back and just being totally relaxed, realising that we have Kerry in the hoop at half-time. And a couple of Mayo supporters come up to me, what do you think, John? I said, sure, look at this, the evidence is there. I've never, the maturity of the team, I mean, we don't want to start talking about resilience, and the character's there. I mean, the time is right now. I think this bunch of players, and we thought last year was a brilliant opportunity. We've been there, we're there right now. There's a seismic shift, I think, in that replay against Roscommon. Like, I mean, from walking out of Pearse Stadium and that wet, dreary Sunday afternoon being beaten, that Mayo team that went in that day was, I think, fitness level was about 50 or 60%. I think they had taken a chance, Mike, and maybe coming through the front door and maybe trying to hit the sweet spot in late August, September. Got caught, albeit very, very shortly, could have got over the line, didn't. Made a few mistakes en route. We were really stretched against Derry. I mean, we were very, very close. We're living on the line here now. The first half display down from the Clare boys down in us was absolutely awesome. They couldn't sustain that level of energy, the Clare boys, but they really asked questions. Cork stretched us, go down, you know, extra time. Roscommon, we were so lucky. But then in the replay, it was like they just stepped up to a different level. They went from the pass class up to the honours class in one fell swoop, and they were just re-energised. There was just an incredible shift in the whole attitude of the team, and they sustained that going into the Kerry games. And I think, look, there's no guarantees in sport, and we don't know the uncertainty of outcomes, which makes us all unique and has us all here chasing tickets and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, if we're ever going to win it, this is the time. I mean, I think we're primed. I mean, when Gerard refers to the leadership and the characters that we have, I mean, they're all there. They're right around the pitch. And like, I mean, we talked outside about the Jason Doherty's. My God, I mean, to see the resurgence in his football and prowess over the last couple of games, it's just incredible. Look at Andy Moran's Player of the Year if he has a final. So there's no guarantee. Dublin are good, but they haven't been tested. I mean, you go back to Kildare, Leinster final, I think they scored a goal in 17. There was a vulnerability about the full back line that was talking about being exploited. I mean, that hasn't been tested yet. We will test that on Sunday, particularly if Aidan O'Shea's going to end up between 11 and 14. But I just think we have a fantastic opportunity. We can't sit down here and say, yes, Mayo are definitely going to win this. It'd be lovely if we say that, but that's not the way it is. We've got to go and deliver a performance to win it.
Austin, everyone is trying to figure out just how good Dublin are. I mean, going for 3 in a row, nobody's laid a hand on them this year yet anyway. You're living in Dublin, you're based in Dublin, you played a lot of club football in Dublin. You know a lot of the former Dublin footballers quite well. How are they looking at Mayo? I mean, are they genuinely worried, genuinely concerned? Do you think behind it all they believe their destiny is to win 3 in a row?
I'm not quite sure about that. I think Dublin have always thought of Mayo as being a little bit of a problem, and particularly in the last number of years, we've got right under their skin in a lot of ways. And I think coming in next Sunday, they'll certainly be looking at Mayo and they'll be thinking that they're going to be in one hell of a battle. And I think in terms of, and John just alluded to there, I think Mayo are ripe. We've never been this ripe in terms of performance. We've over, nearly 700 championship minutes of football in us at this stage. Dublin don't have that. Mayo have been in the death zone in terms of games on a number of occasions, and they've been forced to learn in real time and iron out an awful lot of kinks within their system in terms of tactically and also psychologically as well. And John alluded to there as well, like in terms of the shift in performance. And I think from a player's perspective, that sometimes can happen. You out on a field and you don't know it, but it's kind of like a collective energy that comes and it raises a bar everywhere. I think next week, I'm quietly confident in terms of, I think if we pull Dublin into one-on-one battles all over the place. Tyrone didn't do it. In terms of that, they allow them possession and they come at them at a wave and that. But I think for us to get across the line next week, I think we'll have to try and take Dublin on in as many individual battles around the field and try and get players to match up and pull these guys all over the place in terms of. So I'd be quietly confident. I think the sap is rose. I think in terms of conditioning, we're right on the money, and I've no doubt that if we just get the tactical and our own matchups right, I think that we could have Sam Maguire here in 2 weeks' time without a shadow of a doubt. Yeah.
Nice to hear.
No pressure.
Jerry, you have 2 very experienced teams coming into the football final on Sunday week, and you've been through the mill with Clare in All Ireland finals that have gone either way. What's different about All Ireland final Sunday to any other game that a player and a manager goes into? I mean, what kind of questions does it ask of a man, of a player, a coach, a manager?
Well, there was a terrific article by Tony Brown from Waterford, who played in the 2008 final there after the final, because Tony's a really honest guy, and he had won 4 Munster championships, he had won All-Ireland semi-finals, he had played in 6 All-Ireland semi-finals, 6 or 7 Munster finals, but he was explaining how different the All-Ireland is. And I tried to explain it last Sunday before the start of the final that when you're down on that field and the parade starts, and the noise is coming down off the Hogan, the Cusick, the Davin, the Hill 16, it is absolutely deafening. It's like a scene that you have never experienced before. And the first time I was down there, I said, geez, it takes great men to perform under this kind of pressure, especially in their first time. I think the huge advantage of Mayo have is that they're used to this. That they have been there before, that they're used to this. If you're going there for your first time and try and win the first time out, it is very difficult. Now, we did it against the All-Ireland champions Offaly because we had geared in so much on being ready for half-3 that anything happened before that, we were saying, forget about it, laugh at it, talk about it, ignore it completely. But I think with Mayo this time, that there is something really different about the team, the way I see it. And I think they can look at a few things. One thing is, if you remember the last time when Dublin were playing well, you had the kind of a Mexican roar going on halfway through the game, crowd cheering on all these passes. Any time that has happened in a game, whether in soccer or in Gaelic football, I remember it happened with Meath one year in the semi-final, and Galway beat him in the final after. It never really works. The next day out, the performance is never as good. And I was explaining to John outside, I was hoping during that game with Dublin that they'd finish with a flourish, because there was about a 15-minute period in the second half, and they weren't pulling away. They weren't opening a gap. They looked very average. Even Connor, my son said, geez, he said, Mayo have a right chance here. Next thing, Dublin come and they score 2 or 3 goals and a few points, and everyone says, oh, they're brilliant. They're not as brilliant as people think. They might be vulnerable. And the one team that can test them, because they have everything in place now. I feel that everything is in place for Mayo. This is just looking at that as an outsider, as a hurling man, as only a casual kind of looking at football in a casual way. But I do read body language and all those things as being very, very important. I think this is definitely the greatest chance they've ever had of winning in All-Ireland. And I think psychologically and in every way, it favours them. The pressure is on Dublin, all the pressure is on Dublin here. A real chance for Mayo. But maybe the last chance, and they better take it.
John, I must ask you about Stephen Rochford. He's a clubmate of yours from Crossmolina. He played under you. He worked alongside you. And I know you had a big influence on him as he came up through the ranks as a footballer and as a young coach. He's just brought Mayo to their second successive All-Ireland final. They've only lost 3 championship games on his watch. And yet, this summer, subjected to some very harsh criticism, his character, his leadership abilities called into question.
Yeah.
He says it doesn't bother him. He's deflected it away. And I suppose results speak for themselves. He's in a final. But for Stephen, this must have been a very difficult summer at certain times.
Yeah.
And you must be very proud of him to see him where he is at this stage.
I have to say, most of you would have probably read, there was one article in particular written by a West of Ireland man who resides down in West Cork.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely scurrilous. I thought it was pathetic. Now, he came out and the following Sunday and addressed it somewhat without an apology. And I think that the title of the following was A Team of Lions Led by Einsteins. The previous week, it was a team of lions led by donkeys. Now, that is disgraceful, cheap journalism. It's a cheap shot at any individual. And for Stephen to say it doesn't affect him, it does affect him. That would affect anybody, because it was nasty and ugly. And there were a couple of, I mean, let's be honest, I've made mistakes on the line. You take a chance and doing something, and every single decision you make when you win is just powdered over. You lose by a point. You might be the most brilliant manager in the country. You lose by a point, and every single decision is criticised and analysed and critiqued, and you become the clown. And that's the reality. That's modern sport, and that's the way it is. Which is a little bit unfortunate, because, and I've stood behind. I've often go to games and I go behind a manager to see, and I've seen some of the so-called most brilliant managers in this country, and I see nothing but ordinariness. But they're blessed with a brilliantly talented bunch of players. And so management is it's a funny thing in a way. And I said to Gerard outside, I would not like to manage an inter-county team right now, because when I was down in Clare in 1990 to 1994, I think I saw 3 or 4 buses coming down with the homecoming to Galway, albeit they had a minor team and a senior team coming home. But there's another big 50-seater bus with the entourage coming behind them. As I said to Gerard, when I was down in Clare, I nearly had to drive the bus myself. That was the reality. That was the reality. I did all the accommodation booking in case the board down there would shove us into an old cheap B&B, Gerard, saving the money for the aristocrats, the hurlers in East Clare. We had that little bit of a battle going on down there at the time. But Stephen Rochford, the reality is there are lucky managers. I mean, you know what? If he goes on to win the All-Ireland, he'll be carried shoulder high up Main Street, Castlebar.
Like you were in Tuam in 99?
Well, I didn't win the All-Ireland now. I mean, I have a unique distinction and a unique record that some of you mightn't be aware of. But I was a manager who managed Crossmolina in 2003 in March, lost an All-Ireland final by a point to Nemo Rangers. A couple of months later, I lost the 2004 All-Ireland final with Mayo Seniors. And a week after that, I had the unique distinction of managing Mayo under 21s to another famous loss. Now, was there any manager in the country that has managed to lose 3 All-Ireland finals in the space of 6 or 7 months? So I know nothing about winning All-Irelands, but and there were times I'd love for the Mayo. I just love to see the happiness and the joy of, we talk about the support, and Gerard said, and in Gerard's even down in Clare, East Clare here, and the Clare people. And every single county are just wishing Mayo of the line, because they love Mayo. Why? Because we're honest. We play in such an attractive brand of football. We travel in such numbers. I mean, Croke Park are just delighted. I remember the City West years ago, John Glynn, who was the general manager at that time, he said, give me a Mayo All-Ireland final. It's worth about 15 Armads because they wouldn't spend tuppence. Tyrone, I'm not referring to Oisin here. Tyrone, the miserable fuckers gone up to their Bible belt back in Tyrone for missionary mass the following morning. But give me a Mayo. And I tell you what, they know how to party. So I would love to see the party happen for a week. But Stephen Rochford, good luck to him. He stepped into the breach. I remember pushing him and encouraging him a number of years ago to get the Mayo under 21 job. He's fully deserved it because he's a brilliant young coach. He's a very, very young coach. But the modern managers, look, he has an entourage now behind them. Like, I mean, you have Tony McEntee, you have Donny Buckley, who's there for years, and you have Peter Burke in there. And you have about 15 others looking at laptops and GPS tracking devices, the whole lot. I mean, who's the manager? I don't know, but good luck to Stephen. I hope, I really do, it's across the mind of man. And I know his family were particularly put out as well about the articles and the scurrilous reporting. We're all human after all, and we're in an amateur sport. And I felt very, very sorry for that kind of journalism.
But I'll tell you a story about popularity. I will tell you a story that happened to me about being popular or criticism and all of that. When I was with Clare, the biggest rivalry was with Tipperary, and the flagging that used to go on, and what was done on the sideline, when I was down the sideline, what they used to call me, my God almighty, it was, and we used to lap it up and say nothing. But anyway, it came, as everyone knows, it came nearly to a boxing match in Innis one night, an under-21 game, and it went over the top completely. But anyway, on one of my last days with Clare, we were after beating Tipperary below in Páirc Uí Chaoimh in a replay, in a terrific game in a replay, and I said to Tony Considine, geez, I said, you know, it might be our last day with Clare. We'll walk back from Páirc Uí Chaoimh into the centre of Cork, which is a long walk. So everyone was gone home, we thought, and we were walking back in along, and we were coming on, two was walking along. Next thing we saw a van with Tipperary South in it, and two fellas inside in the front of it. And you could see by the demeanour of the two of them that they were going to do something. So I said to Constance, keep the head down, I said, we're in trouble here, you know? So your man in the front of it anyway, he jumped out into me and he says, hey, look, Nan, he said. Yeah, I said, yeah. Any chance of the autograph? No, I was so relieved. I was so relieved. I said, no problem whatsoever. I said, who's it for? He said, it's for the wife, he says. She's at home, he says. He was like a fellow out of the Unbelievables. The wife. He said, the wife, he said, she's at home. He says, right, so I said, what's her name? Marie, I'll never forget it. So he gave me a piece of paper, and I was like, to Marie, best wishes, you know, your job and that. And he never looked at me now, and I handed it back to him. And for the first time, he looked straight up into my face, he says, Jesus, he said, she'll get some shock when she gets this. Because Christ, he says, you have no idea how she hates you. So, don't worry about being popular.
Austin, I don't envy you trying to follow up the two lads now. They're just starting to get warmed up now.
We're getting good.
They're only getting their second wind. I see so many young kids, Austin, around at the minute wearing Mayo jerseys, and I don't think I've ever seen as many Mayo jerseys as I have this summer as this pilgrimage starts to take shape. But for you, do you remember the first time it was handed to you? You know, properly handed to you for a competitive game. And what did it mean to you as a young guy from Louisburg, from a West Mayo club, to represent your county and represent your county at Croke Park as well?
Yeah, it was absolutely huge. I think my debut was in a league game down in Charlestown against Sligo, and I remember the build-up to it. Pat Holmes had brought me in at that stage. I was only a whippersnapper. I was still under 21, but it's probably something that I'd come into my consciousness at quite a young age. I suppose being from Louisburg, we wouldn't have had a huge amount of guys playing for Mayo, but there was one in terms of Joe Stanton. He was on the 51 team, and I just remember being very, very young and going into, he owned a chemist in the town at the time, and I remember going in there with my dad, and it was a chemist, an old school chemist in terms of it was a toy store, and you could get a fishing rod, and you could buy a dosing for cattle, and it was the whole thing. But I remember, you know, seeing him at that stage and looking at him and thinking that I knew there was something quite special about him, and I knew that he had won an All-Ireland for Mayo. And I was probably about maybe 7 or 8 or 9 at the time. And I mean, that was the first kind of time it had entered my consciousness that, you know, that maybe that I could do this. And from there on, I suppose, I had always in the back of my mind that I would love to have done that. So when I did eventually get handed a jersey, it meant a huge amount to me. you know, it was something that I prided, and you know, it's just the sense of achievement, but also that you're representing a huge body of people. Obviously, you know, pressure comes with that as well. But you know, something I learned over the years then, that pressure is a privilege. You know, that you're representing your family, you're representing your club and your county, and then when you look out and you see the extravaganza of Mayo support that go to games, then you know it's something you plug into it, and you get a real sense of a connection with the wider county when you play for Mayo. You know, so it's just an unbelievable positive experience I had.
How do you look back in your career, though, having not won the All-Ireland medal? Because so many Mayo footballers over the years would say they have such huge regrets and they think about it quite a lot. But for you on a personal level, how do you feel about it?
For me on a personal level, I don't know if I look at it in terms of regret. Obviously, you know, and someone actually asked me that during the week, and I was thinking about it, and you go home maybe at Christmases and you see the 2 silver Celtic crosses on the mantelpiece, and you think maybe just for a fleeting moment, God, you know, they could be gold, you know, and would your life be completely different? But, you know, I've said it before to you, Mike, that medals, you know, they're not going to define you. What will define you is the people that are around you when you're put down in the sod, and the memories you make and all of that. So I think maybe people get too caught up on the whole sort of, you know, the All-Ireland medal and that and it becomes all consuming. And maybe that sometimes has in the past put a weight of pressure on Mayo players, and it's been, you know, a tough burden to carry, that they're going to be the ones to do it. So for me personally, looking back, I had huge I suppose, just huge admiration for the guys that I played with, and the memories and the relationships that I built along the way. And it was all positive. You know, you got down in the days you were beaten. Obviously, 04 and 06, we took a bit of a clipping. But as you get older and you stand away from it and you look at it, I suppose time is a great healer in many respects. And you look at and John, you know, you can jump in on this, but that 04 and 06 team in terms of what we were beaten by, Kerry, there was such a phenomenal side in terms of, like, if you look at the household names that from that, the Moynahans, the O'Sheas, the Gooches, you know, they were just an incredible bunch. You know, we were lucky to come at a stage and not get you know, to meet a team like that. So I have only positive memories, you know, of my time being involved.
John, just curious, if you were given the floor in the Mayo dressing room a few minutes before they run out against Dublin, would you like to be in that position, first of all? And what do you think you'd say to them at this stage, with the benefit of experience and the benefit of hindsight?
I have to say, well, the day of, you know, smashing and banging inside the dressing is over. I mean, you're dealing with now a very, very intelligent bunch of people. They're all third level educated. Some of them way more educated than you might be yourself. So there's no need to. I think the Mayo team is kind of, I won't say self-managing, but I mean they're very, very mature. I know they meet up regularly. They have, I won't say clandestine meetings, but I mean, there's very little to be done with them. I mean, I think their time is right, and they're very mature. I mean, their skill level is superb. Their game awareness and game intelligence is something that I've marvelled at, particularly against Kerry in the replay. Just a smartness, and you know, Kevin McLaughlin at one stage was going to pass a ball, and his opponent slipped, and he just drove on again. Just his intelligence and awareness. We've never had a full forward as clever as intelligent as Andy Moran. He's the most natural full forward I have ever seen play football in Mayo. I mean, he makes 7-8 runs over and back, and he's playing brilliantly well. There's very little to be said. I mean, all you want to do is just keep those boys ticking over, and I know they have a big day planned on Sunday. They're going into to meet up early in the morning, and they're having an A versus B game. And I mean, people talk about it's been mentioned by Jack O'Shea and Keith Barr and some of the chats we're having after games. The 8 or 9 games run, they'll be wrecked, they'll be tired, they'll be frittered. So that's dream stuff for a footballer, being out Sunday after Sunday after Sunday. I mean, they love that. I mean, and in one way, I wish to hell the All-Ireland final was held the week after we had beaten Kerry. That 3-week gap becomes a bit of a chore.
Yeah,
absolutely. You know, you fill in time getting the whole press night out of the way and all that whole rubbish. I know there's a blanket ban press-wise now on the team. It's just, but they're very mature. I mean, there's very little to be said. I suppose you get down and say a decade of the Rosary or something like that. I don't know what decade now. What decade would you come out with?
You'd have a ball of Hail Marys, I'd say.
You'd have a big ball of Hail Marys and all that kind of stuff.
The one thing I'd say to him, Mike, is if you try and do something for yourself, it puts an awful lot of pressure on yourself, and you feel pressure. Whereas if you're trying to do anything for somebody else, you don't feel the same pressure. And what I used to always emphasize to Claire is, we're not doing this really for ourselves. We're doing it for the generations before us that had a dream of getting to Croke Park and winning All Ireland, or even a Munster Championship. So, you know, you take yourself out of the equation and you put it as you're doing it for an ulterior, a different motive altogether, a deeper motive, you know, to satisfy people who have supported your county. Some of them are 80s and 90s. That's been 60 or 70 years, in our case was 80 something, hoping that an All Ireland would come to Clare. We have an opportunity to do it. And it's amazing how when you transfer it from yourself onto a cause like that, it eases the pressure. And we used to go into that dressing room as relaxed as could be the 2 years we won the All Ireland, as into Croke Park, because we always emphasised it's not for ourselves, it's for all the hurling people in Clare and all the generations who went before us that wore that jersey, and was to show them that jersey. They wore it for almost 100 years and they had never seen an All Ireland. We have a chance to satisfy all those people. And when you do it in that way, the pressure goes off yourself and you achieve feats. You get something out of yourself that you never thought was there. And they could just do that on the beat. And I thought, you know, that was the secret to us, making that breakthrough, getting to Croke Park for the first time in 85 years, or 84 years, whatever it was, and performing so well when we got there and winning. It was because that emphasis was on that, especially for the 3 or 4 weeks before the All Ireland, you know. And I think the Mayo players feel like that as well. You know, there's such a desire to satisfy the Mayo people, that desire that's there, not alone among Mayo, I suppose, but among all the country, that Mayo would achieve. And, you know, if they go out with that attitude, it's just amazing the performance you can get out of yourself. When you're not concentrating on yourself, you're doing it for somebody else.
The time has flown by. That's an incredible speech we've just heard there. And I suppose the obvious question to ask you, the last question to ask you, I'm not sure if there's anybody in the room here who remembers 50 or 51. Certainly, I don't think there's anyone here in the top table that remembers 50 or 51. That was before your time, John, was it?
Carry on, Mike. You're doing a great,
But Ger-
doing a great job.
we're all thinking the same thing. And the amount of people that have brought this up in conversations in the last few weeks, what would it be like if Mayo were to win this All Ireland for the first time since 51? What would the Sunday night and the Monday and the rest of our lives be like? I mean, you've been in that position. What is it like? What was it like in Clare?
What would it be like to beat Dublin? That is the first thing. The first thing is, you have an opposition here, you have to beat them. What would it be like to beat them? What have you to do to beat them? Now, the aftermath of it is just like, there's a sense, like, you could say excitement and all that kind of, and hype and all that, but there's a feeling, I always say, of total fulfillment when you win an All Ireland. It is a deeper feeling and it lasts longer. The excitement is transient. It stays with you for a while and disappears. Oisin would know that now as well. When you do win that All Ireland, there is a deep-seated feeling of contentment that lasts a lifetime. That is and it gets better as time goes on. You actually, when you win it, you don't actually realise you've won it. You know, you're hyped up on the day and all of that kind of stuff. But as time goes on, there's a feeling of contentment that you've done something, that you've satisfied your own people. That's the way that you fulfilled a long desire of your people. And your people here are the Mayo people. Ours were the Clare people. A desire of those, the generations that were there, that went before them and didn't see it. And to have done that gives you a feeling of satisfaction, or as I say, fulfillment, that lasts a lifetime. And nothing, excitement has nothing to do with that. It's that fulfillment. That is the real prize of winning. And it's worth anything. It's worth giving anything to get that feeling.
I think that's a beautiful way to finish part one of tonight's discussion. We could have sat here and chatted all night, lads. It's been an absolute pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, Austin O'Malley, John Maughan and Ger Loughnane.